Solutions to the Global Energy Crisis. No to Nuclear. By Nichelle, Laura, Sydney, Thomas, Brian, and Daniel.
Enrico Fermi discovered fission in 1934. Fission is when a decay process takes place in an atom when it splits into two, creating two smaller and lighter nuclei. Today's nuclear reactors use a process of fission to create energy with uranium atoms. Below you can see a neutron being injected into a uranium atom, splitting it into two lighter elements, giving off energy in this process. To understand the scale of the nuclear power plants today's power plants can power about 10 million LED light bulbs with the energy they produce per year. While astonishing, nuclear power plants can pose an immense danger. 3 examples of nuclear power plant explosions are Chernobyl, Kyshtym, and 3 Mile Island. That is a picture of the Chernobyl explosion. The radiation that is released in these explosions can cause long-term health effects such as cancer and high infant mortality rates. For this reason, it is important to look at other sustainable and safer options. Processes that use the weather, such as wind turbines and solar, and another option is geothermal, may prove to be better long-term sustainable options. Nuclear power plants, while not the long-term solution, can certainly help in the transition to sustainable energy.
So, can nuclear reactors help solve climate change? Electricity accounts for 27% of greenhouse gas emissions, with the burning of fossil fuels responsible for 67% of electricity generation. In contrast, nuclear power plants do not release any greenhouse gases into the atmosphere when they operate. In 2017, the United States avoided 547 million metric tons of CO2 emissions by using nuclear energy. And 70% of electricity in France is generated from nuclear, which is more than any other country in the world. France's electricity-related greenhouse gas emissions are 1/6 of the European average, indicating that nuclear power could have a strong role in reducing emissions and combating climate change. However, when we think about solving climate change, we need to consider the deeper, full-fledged implications of a transition to nuclear energy, more than the sole fact that greenhouse gas emissions will be lowered. Nuclear energy only decreases emissions related to electricity, but 73% of global emissions are unrelated to electricity generation. Instead, the burning of fossil fuels is used for farming, deforestation, transportation, heating, and other industrial processes. Also, nuclear technology may not adapt well to the continuously changing climate. Reactors use a great amount of water, and due to a drought in 2003, 23% of America's nuclear plants were forced to shut down. The transition to nuclear power could also distract from and impede the large-scale development of renewable energies like solar and wind, which are the real solutions to climate change.
What are the new technologies that are available and can improve nuclear's complicated reputation? The first is small modular reactors. They are about a third of the size of typical reactors. These SMRs can be manufactured and assembled before being transported to their operating location. This makes them safer and requires less capital investment and construction time. Another advantage of these SMRs is that they are relatively effective in remote locations. This is because they are well equipped to handle fluctuating energy demands. The next new technology is Generation 4 reactors. These reactors would all operate at much higher temperatures than normal reactors and use a variety of coolants other than water, such as molten salt and sodium. They would also have more passive safety features and decreased waste production. Both of these new technologies are still in the developmental stage and will be available in the near future.
As we've discussed in class, nuclear fusion as one of the successful solutions to our global energy crisis is considered science fiction. So a quick recap on nuclear fission versus nuclear fusion, as you can see in the image on the bottom right. Nuclear fission is the splitting of one nucleus into two lighter nuclei, whereas nuclear fusion is the opposite, where you take two nuclei to form one nucleus. Now, the major challenges with accomplishing this on Earth is that it requires immense amounts of pressure for long durations of time, as well as extremely high temperatures that can go over 100 million degrees Fahrenheit. Now, it's extremely challenging to carry out these conditions long enough for nuclear fusion to create enough energy. Another issue with nuclear fusion is that currently there are no existing and working facilities or reactors, and we don't know how long it will take for them to be created. This could be a several decade-long process, and we simply don't have the time frame for this. The current projects that have been announced are predicted to be running by 2025. However, there is no concrete evidence that this is realistically going to happen, and we argue that in order to become climate neutral by 2050, It's just not realistic to rely on nuclear fusion to be developed and functioning in time, which is another reason that we cannot rely on nuclear energy as the solution to our global energy crisis.
I would say that it is not at all realistic to rely on nuclear power in order to replace fossil fuels. The entire process of setting up, planning for, and getting a nuclear power plant up and running can take several decades, usually 2 to 3. And according to climate scientists, we can't wait that long in order to start taking action to mitigate our carbon emissions and reduce what we're doing to cause climate change. This is something that would take a very long time to get going, especially given that at the moment only 8% of energy in the United States is from nuclear. So we would have to create a significant number of nuclear power plants, both in the US and around the world, and it would take so long to do so that it is not at all realistic that we could actually meet the world's energy needs via nuclear in a reasonable span of time. It is also not a politically feasible thing to do because after the accidents at Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island, people are very afraid of nuclear energy, particularly in the US and Japan. And obviously, people being afraid of nuclear in the United States causes a lot of backlash when we do try to switch to nuclear energy. And that causes a lot of delays and can make it so that creating nuclear power plants would take even longer than it already would. And it's just not something that people are in favor of. Most people do not think it is safe, and it is not something that we would be able to manage to do in a timely manner, and it would be far better for us to choose different forms of energy to replace fossil fuels.
Nuclear power has immense potential to help provide energy to the world as clean and efficiently as possible. However, nuclear power is still a delicate resource to implement and manage. In the future, nuclear power has a potential to help solve this climate crisis, especially when technology further develops so it can be used with less risks. Furthermore, the advancements in technology may allow people to harness nuclear fusion. People will then be able to have efficient and clean energy around the world with minimal drawbacks. Nevertheless, the path to obtaining full nuclear potential is long and challenging. Unfortunately, for the time being, nuclear power is not a suitable solution for climate change. As discussed, there are too many variables holding it back. Even though the world is on a timer with climate change, the solution cannot be rushed, otherwise more harm than good will be done. Nuclear power can be an immediate solution for smaller countries, such as France. However, larger countries such as America and Russia would not realistically be able to implement it without repercussions. Nuclear power can be the final step in the process to combat climate. In time, it can become the clean energy this planet needs to survive and thrive. Until that time comes, the world should look for other alternatives for clean energy.